and welcome viewers. We have seen today the big interview of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, with Arnab Goswami, editor-in-chief of the Republic Media Network. It's an interview that really for the first time makes Ukraine's agenda very clear in terms of ending this war, the invasion that Russia launched. We are now going to discuss it. We've had numerous voices speak to us, and joining us now first from Kiev is Volodymyr Solovian. He is an analyst in the New Geopolitics Research Network, and also live from Tehran we have Farshid Bagherian, who is the Eurasia Director at the West Asia Research Center. I want to start with Mr. Solovian. Mr. Solovian, if you can hear me, my first question to you is, on numerous occasions, Volodymyr Zelenskyy told Arnab Goswami, our editor-in-chief, that he wants direct one-on-one talks with Vladimir Putin. He is unwilling to so much as respond to Sergei Lavrov because they're not at the same level. He only and only wants to speak to Putin. So where do you think is the hold-up so far? Why isn't this conversation happening then?
Thanks for having me. Yes, it was Ukrainian position for a long time that Kiev is ready for direct negotiations with Moscow, but during last years, Moscow rejected this opportunity, and this situation prevented to the war.
Farshid, if you can hear me, would you like to take that then? Zelenskyy only wants to speak to Putin. He will not speak to Lavrov. Where is the holdup? Why aren't these talks happening?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. So the fact is, we are talking about the level of diplomacy. So Mr. Zelenskyy and Mr. Putin are the same level. So there is no need to talk with Mr. Lavrov. But the fact is, among the words that Mr. Zelenskyy used, one important thing is half-baked sanction. It means that Mr. Zelenskyy is very upset with the war, with the rule of war. For that reason, he is insisting to talk with Mr. Putin directly, because really, maybe he lost his all hopes about the war because of the half-baked sanction. Actually, we are talking about the Bucha massacre and mass graves, and this is the returning point of the war. And he wants the whole world to take a new sanction or new action against Mr. Putin or maybe Russia. So I believe that he is very upset. For this reason, he's trying to talk directly with Mr. Putin to stop losing of the losing of the infrastructures. Yeah.
Right. I take also your inference and mention of the half-baked measures, and I want to put that across to Volodymyr Solovian, who is now back with us. Mr. Solovian, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Ukraine's president, he made a mention of the measures and the sanctions being half-baked. He says that sanctions need to be like new age weapons. They need to be like nuclear weapons, in fact. So where do you think his reference is to? Is it to energy? Has not enough been done to curtail the supply of energy from Russia? Where do you think Ukraine stands on this?
Well, obviously, European sanctions on gas and oil supplies will not end Russian possibilities and Russian capabilities to come into war and prolong this conflict for coming months. But there is a really main leverage that United Europe has on Russia, and this is cutting off natural gas supplies, because since the beginning of the war, European Union sent more than 30 billions of euro to Russia for natural gas, and that is not a situation that will help us to reach peace in a short time. So obviously that Europe has to rethink this ongoing situation, and the next steps of next sanctions will include more restrictions on gas and oil. Russian gas and oil.
But Mr. Solovian, just a quick follow-up. Where do you think the problem lies? Is it, say, with Germany? Because there is word here in India that if Germany were to stop receiving Russian gas, it would freeze immediately. Where do you think the problem is? Who is the big hold-up, Mr. Solovian?
Yes, Germany can't cut Russian supplies immediately, but there is a plan to renew their nuclear stations, and they can put some LNG gas to the European market. So obviously there is many ways to achieve the goal of Europe without Russian gas, and only such severe steps towards Russia make enough pressure on Kremlin, and only such steps can really make a shift in terms of ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he made a statement about the United Nations also, and he's been talking about the UN increasingly of late. So has Pope Francis, in fact. But Zelenskyy said that the United Nations showing concern is not what Ukraine needs. It needs it to issue ultimatums. Where do you think the United Nations is falling short? Is it at all capable of stopping this war?
I think that in terms of Russia being member of United Nations Council on Peace, there is a big issue whether Russia can still remain on its position in United Nations organization after massacres on outskirts of Kyiv and all those pictures when civilians with tied hands behind were shot with bullets. And obviously, and all the world will sooner or later realize that these are war crimes made by Russian forces. And this international policy that Russia provides undermine peace on the whole continent. And that may lead to bad consequences all over the world in terms of food supplies, energy supplies, and so on. So obviously that United Nations can't deal with this situation and only make some statements while world is on the blink of the biggest security crisis since the World War II.
Right, absolutely, Mr. Solovian there. Farshid, I'm told, is back with us. I want to pick up where Volodymyr left off, which was the biggest security crisis that the world has faced since the Second World War. An interesting statement that Mr. Zelenskyy made was that he wants heavy weapons to be deployed on Ukrainian soil. He doesn't want to use them to attack Russia, but he believes that they are essential to ensure that this kind of invasion doesn't happen and the war ends. Where do you stand on these weapons, heavy weapons, I'm assuming nukes and just below nuclear weapons, being sent to Ukraine? Is that what the world needs right now?
It used to be nuclear power in before 1993 in the Ukraine land. But according to some negotiations and after some agreement, they lost their power. In that time, if you remember, Mr. John J. Mearsheimer told that the Ukraine, by losing of nuclear power, lost everything. This is the fact. But right now, heavy weapons and heavy arms can make the balance of power or balance of threat with Ukraine. This is the need of the Ukraine right now, because after the meeting of the NATO allies in Brussels, they are changing the trajectory of war, if you can see, and they are approaching to U.S. Russian Empire with stepping on very slowly. The first day they denied to help, military help, and right now they are using all of their power to penetrate to this war. And this is the fact. For example, the decision for establishing 5,000 soldier rapid force reaction based in Germany. It's a new, it's a new concept for helping the Ukraine. And Ukraine right now, because all the ceasefire negotiation is going to vain, because Mr. Trump, remember the Mr. Trump that wanted to European leaders, European countries to endorse at 2% of the GDP for the NATO expenses, but it didn't get through. But right now, there is a race of supplying and purchasing for the arms, and this is the fact. And I believe that the Anglo-Saxon world is not is prolonging this war, and they are not ending up this war. So for this reason, I think instead of the ceasefire negotiation, the best way is to deploy the heavy arms to Ukraine land.
So Farshid is in favor of deploying heavy weapons on Ukrainian soil, just as what Volodymyr Zelenskyy said. I want to go now to, again, Volodymyr Solovian. An interesting mention that your president made was that Ukraine is ready to discuss Donbass and Crimea with Putin if it comes to it. However, he will not settle for anything less than Russian forces withdrawing to their February 24th positions, and that for him is non-negotiable, and they will also take back the cities in Ukraine occupied by Russia. So what is Ukraine in effect willing to compromise here? Is it willing to compromise at all to end this war?
Obviously, it is a long-term goal of Ukraine to negotiate with Russia on temporarily occupied territories of Crimea and Donbass. Even before this war, there was a Minsk process for almost 8 years, and Ukrainian main goal was to negotiate not with Russian puppets, Russian so-called people republics in Donbass and Lugansk regions, but with Russia, who supported separatists with weapon supplies, with goods and money and so on. And obviously that this war may end only on the level of nation leaders, and Putin and Mr. Zelenskyy should negotiate on future status of these territories, Crimea and Donbass. But for Ukraine, it's a red line and unnegotiable question that Ukraine should abandon these territories, because it is what Russia wants. No government in Ukraine can accept this, because Ukrainian society will not accept such point of future agreement. That is why the only possibility to reach some understanding between Ukraine and Russia on the future status of Crimea and Donbass is temporary, to fix up their temporal status, and then maybe some democratic instruments as a referendum may be implied to help people to decide, and that is a big question still now. But obviously Ukraine will never abandon this territory, because territorial integrity is is the main goal of Ukrainian internal policy. We don't pretend any Russian territories. Ukraine was never an aggressor in its history, but all we want is to retake our historical territories that were fixed after the collapse of Soviet Union.
Right. So you're saying essentially that the territories are a red line for Ukraine. Ukraine will not compromise, and Ukraine has never invaded anyone. Farshid, I'd like your views also on essentially the same topic, which is Ukraine offering enough of a compromise? Is there even a remote possibility that the war can be ended without Ukraine ceding some form of territory, whether it be Crimea or Donbass? Can the war be ended without Ukraine ceding those to Russia?
I believe that in some days, nowadays, Ukraine military can achieve some victories, and for this reason, I believe that Mr. Zelensky is just pronouncing these words just to making shape a table for negotiation, nothing else. And the territorial integrity for them is very important. They never lose the Donbass, they never lose the Crimea and other part of the Ukraine. I believe that it's just some kind of the political words. And the fact is, right now, they are approaching to victory. I remember that Mr. Antony Blinken said 2 days before that the victory for the Ukraine is possible. This is the fact. By aiding all world right now with the heavy weapons, suppose that with this very military forces of Ukraine, they could withdraw some Russian forces. And with the aid of the world and the will of the world, suppose that all the heavy weapons right now in the Ukraine land, and suppose the military forces will balance with the Russian force, it means that there is no need to talk about the Donbass, to talk about the independence of the Crimea. I don't believe that. Yeah, because I want to repeat that the world is right now is one to prolonging this war to make Russia to lose all its power, and this is the chance for the world, and the world is no longer want to lose this chance. Yeah.
I think that's totally fair. There is a lot of evidence to substantiate the fact that there are certainly interests that want to prolong the war. We want to just speak about some of the other countries right now. And I'll stay with Farshid for this question. Farshid, there are 8 countries that Volodymyr Zelensky mentioned that Ukraine would like to offer a security guarantee to be a part of any such pact. How do you, what do you make of his choice of countries? The US, the UK, France, of course, on one side, and he also wants China, India to also be a part. What do you make of the selection of countries for a security guarantee, and do you think it can come about?
I believe that the China's role is very important, but right now China is involved with another issue with the AUKUS, another pact of security pact with the Australia, Britain, and USA with the South Sea of the China. And because of the issue of Taiwan and the submarine, the nuclear submarine of Australia. So right now, China is not getting involved in this war right now, but China could be a good, not as a guarantor. It's some government can push and can stop and can hold the Russia to not invade anymore. India is a very powerful government, and India can be a guarantor. But the rest of the world, for example, Turkey is trying to be a mediator for this, to resolving this issue, this dilemma, not issue. But for Turkey is not, I think is not a level of guarantor, because Turkey is a NATO member and they cannot, for example, Turkey sold out military arms to the Ukraine. So Turkey is not in the position to be the mediator of this ceasefire process. But India is the best one, and China can hold the ceasefire negotiations. But the rest of the world cannot, because the rest of the world is trying to sell their military product.
Mr. Solovian, back to you now. Volodymyr Zelensky is ready to speak to Russia because that is the only way, I presume, this war is going to come to an end. But given what we've seen in Bucha, in Irpin, what we're hearing has happened in Mariupol and all around the country, do you really think that there can be an end to the violence, an end to the bad blood? Where do you see this panning out if indeed the war stops?
Look, the Bucha is not such a case, because every day Russian cruise missiles are targeting civilian buildings, infrastructure, and we are losing our economy. We're faced with gravest situation in our economy for decades. and it is not in our interest. It is not our interest to prolong this war. Obviously, that Ukraine should negotiate. However, even after these massacres in Bucha, Irpin, and soon you will see pictures from other regions, because mass graves appeared almost beside every big town in north and eastern Ukraine, which were targeted by Russian artillery for more than a month. And the second biggest city of Kharkiv is still under fire. But the main issue is battle for Donbas. It is just a beginning, and soon, I think in 2 or 1 week, we will see the result of one of the biggest armored battle since the World War II. Russia is trying to encircle Ukrainian forces in Donbas. And from both sides, it's tens of thousands of soldiers and artillery tanks, armored vehicles, and so on. So only result of the battle for Donbas will be a decisive point that will show us the way for the direct negotiations between two leaders of Ukraine and Russia. And diplomatic positions will be dependent on the result of this battle. Obviously, that Russia will try to encircle Ukrainian forces in Donbas until the 9th of May, because the Victory Day, the day when Nazi Germany capitulated in 1945, is the one of the biggest state, even the biggest state holiday in Russia, and it makes sense for Kremlin to make such a propagandist step and move to show for their audience, for Russians, that they achieved a goal of a victory in Donbas. Only after that we will see how it is possible to negotiate with Russia and what positions will be.
Right. Mr. Volodymyr Solovian, Mr. Farshid Bagarian, I'm afraid that's all the time we have at the moment. Thank you for joining us and speaking and airing your views and analysis about this extraordinary interview on Republic TV with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy speaking to Arnab Goswami. Thank you, gentlemen.
We thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.